All right, SMU with an 11-3 record last year. Billy Embody on the Pony Express. What are the expectations in year one in the ACC?
I think the expectations for SMU are to make a bowl game and maybe surprise some people from time to time. That's really what this program has been about, is continuing to build a roster that can compete with Power 5 programs, now Power 4 programs, and they're going into the ACC with a lot of momentum coming off of that championship season in the AAC. But look, they knew that they had to fill some holes. They needed to address the defensive line where they lost a lot of starters. They still need a corner to come in and step up, but they've got a lot of returning pieces on the offensive side. They still need to address the offensive tackle spot, maybe with somebody from the portal. But other than that, they feel like they've addressed a lot of these positions over the past 2 years with Rhett Lashley, in particular last year, in preparing for the moment that maybe they got the invite to the Pac-12, maybe they got the invite to the ACC. So we've seen schools step up from Group of Five to Power Five and it not go that well, missing out on bowl games. But SMU's supporters have spent a lot of money on this program lately, and I can tell you the expectation is to get to a bowl and win three at least of the non-conference games, and they're all hoping at least one of them's TCU, and that would give them some momentum and some hope and some tangible success in the new league to sell moving forward too.
Yeah, and they enter an ACC that is very top heavy. I mean, you know who your big dogs in the conference are, and then you know who you're going to have a really good chance to beat any given week. I don't think the ACC is quite like the SEC, and I know there's some bottom feeders there, but where every week is a true battle. Especially on the lines, right? Like up front, you mentioned they really like what they've got in certain positions on the lines, but I guess that'd be my biggest question is how do you think they stack up? Maybe not against the Florida States and the Clemsons, because that's maybe unreasonable to ask, but against everybody else, how do you think they look on the line of scrimmage versus the rest of the ACC?
Yeah, the big thing for SMU is going to be finding that extra piece or two on the offensive line that comes from the Power Five ranks, that maybe has some starting experience to shore up the offensive tackle spot. They have two guys in PJ Williams and Savion Byrd who they like right now at tackle, and they have a really solid interior group. Logan Parr played at Texas, Justin Osborne played at Auburn, Ja'Kai Clark started 40 plus games at Miami before he went to SMU. So they have some pieces and some depth there in the interior. They need to address the edges, and then you can feel good about them holding up. Now, this is an SMU team that last year went to Oklahoma, went to TCU, two schools that, at least for Oklahoma, they had some success and they had a solid defensive season, and they were able to hold up and make it a game. The offense is the big unit that has to step up. Defensively, SMU feels like they're walking into this league with a defensive line that should be among the better ones in the league, no matter who you are. They've got really three deep across the board that they feel like are players they can rely on, between a mix of former Miami players and also other Power Five starters across the board, as well as some homegrown talent like Isaiah Smith, an edge rusher, and Corey Roberson, who transferred from Oklahoma, who's been there already for a year. They've developed some players that they've brought in over the course of the last couple of years, and it's all coming together with a group that, again, like I said, goes three deep. So they feel good about the defensive line stacking up very well.
You mentioned this and you mentioned him, but Lashley's done a really good job of getting talent to Dallas, whether it be guys that, like you just said, he's homegrown or stolen from Miami or just wherever. Based on that relationship, there's certainly a bit of a pipeline through the portal with guys going from South Florida out to SMU, but not just Miami. He's done a good job there just in general. A lot of times when coaches are not in a good situation, we ask, like, what does the fan base think about? Obviously Lashley seems to be in a pretty good situation right now, and fans seem to be pretty happy with everything that's going on there in Dallas.
Yeah, I would say so. And the one thing I'll say is this season offensively is going to be really interesting because SMU has a returning quarterback in Preston Stone, but they also have Kevin Jennings, who led them to that win against Tulane in the AAC championship, and he's made some good things happen when he's gotten opportunities. So This offense this season is no longer, all right, new starting quarterback with Preston Stone. It's two very experienced quarterbacks stepping in there, and Preston Stone is expected to start. If he doesn't do well and perform, Rhett Lashley is going to, I think, have to go to Kevin Jennings. That's something that, as you step up into the ACC, is going to be a question. So fans are very happy with what Rhett Lashley is doing overall with this program. And trust me, expectations are high for the amount of money they're putting into it, especially in NIL. But one thing that's going to be important to watch is this offense, because Rhett Lashley is the play caller. And while they were going to have to continue to build talent that is more across the board P4 status, they have tools to be successful. And if they're not, I mean, that might be something that they look at in the future with Rhett Lashley, and just saying, hey, either, we have to really upgrade the talent here, or maybe there is time that a play caller needs to be brought in. But that's the only hiccup at times, is sometimes the offense, despite some of the lofty statistical rankings, it's been inconsistent at times, especially against some good competition last year.
Yeah, kind of running it up against. Yeah, I looked at some of the scores and looked into some of the box scores of the bigger games, and maybe that's to be expected. Maybe it is. I get that, but I can certainly understand that fear, especially now that they're up at that level. You mentioned some of the guys on the defensive line. What about the back seven? Defensive name or two to watch back there for the casual fan that may be tuning in today.
Yeah, at safety, Jonathan McGill is a returning player that SMU fans are very familiar with. He was a one-time commit, but ended up going to Stanford, where he was a captain, transferred back home, and he stayed his second year now for SMU. He'll be one of the unquestioned leaders on the back end. But Ahmad Moses is another safety that's emerging, and he's just a young, I guess he's in his third year now. Time flies, but a very impressive safety, as well as Isaiah Wacobia, who's the defensive MVP from that AAC championship game. The safety position is in good shape with guys like them coming back. When you have the cornerback room, they need others to step up. They do have a linebacker group that returns pretty much every contributor and starter, so that's in good shape with Ahmad Walker, Kobe Wilson, and Alex Kilgore. But they need corners. That's kind of the hole, but you have some really household names at safety and linebacker for sure.
SMU's kind of an under the radar pick to maybe get in and compete this year in the ACC. Now, Florida State and Louisville in back-to-back weeks certainly doesn't seem like a lot of fun. But then after that, Stanford, Duke, Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, Cal, a bunch of teams that either weren't very good or aren't proven in this league. Is that far-fetched to think that they could come in and compete just based on what the schedule looks like outside of those first two ACC games?
No, and that's kind of the hope, is SMU goes into this season with a week 0 game against Nevada. Then they play Houston Christian or Houston Baptist, whichever school it is, and then they go into BYU and TCU. So they're going to be battle tested by the time Florida State comes into Dallas for that ACC opener. Then you look at the schedule and you say, okay, can you steal a game like a Louisville? And then you have these well-placed buys throughout October, and you have an opportunity to play some of these teams that, at least on paper, you got to feel good about being able to contain them because of the defensive talent that they have coming back. I mean, look, SMU lost to Boston College in the bowl game. Ugly field, ugly settings, no starting quarterback for SMU, and it just didn't go their way. But on a neutral turf, one that maybe doesn't have an infield that's all covered up or whatever, maybe they're able to get Thomas Castellanos down a little bit more consistently with this defensive crew that they've got returning. So the back of this defense is really going to determine whether SMU is competitive or not, and the offense is going to determine whether they break through and maybe surprise and end up in Charlotte. But the path is there. It's not. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's a blueprint. Steal one of FSU and Louisville, and then beat the remainder of your schedule that, at least on paper, isn't a murderer's row of NC State and Clemson's and things like that.
Yeah, the schedule makers were easy ish on you in year one, as easy as you can be with having, both teams that were in the ACC championship on your schedule in back-to-back weeks. But like I said, the home stretch is pretty nice, I think, for SMU. All right, I want to get your boldest prediction. I want to get your hottest take. But before we do that, where can people find you and follow you and get more of your work?
Yeah, check us out at ontheponyexpress.com. You can subscribe for just $1 for 2 months using code SMU1. That's SMU, the number one. Find all our work there as well as our podcasts.
Good stuff. All right. This certainly won't get clipped or shared or anything like that. But what is which it's a hot take though, so who cares, right? What is your hottest take for SMU, your boldest prediction for this year?
The hottest take would be that SMU ends up in Charlotte and the blueprint's there. And it's doesn't have anything to do with how they end up in non-conference play against BYU and TCU. It's a matter of stealing one against Florida State and Louisville. And who knows? A lot of changes in Seminole country, different quarterback. Who knows how that works out? But look, the Noles are going to be one of the class teams of the ACC. Louisville, a lot of exodus there this spring after some NIL promises may or may not have been fulfilled. Who knows? Maybe SMU's culture, maybe their defensive group that they have put together can keep those a low-scoring game, and maybe the offense makes a play or two, and they steal one, and then the rest of the blueprint is, looking up at that schedule, you see either teams that were bottom feeders in the ACC last year, or you see teams that were okay bowl games, or a new coaching staff in Duke's, case. The blueprint's there for SMU to get to Charlotte. I'm not saying that they do, but that would by far be the hottest take for SMU this year. And then a bold prediction, something maybe a little less of a hot take. I think SMU has a chance to finish with a top 15 defense nationally. I think what they've done on the defensive line is really, really impressive. They arguably have assembled more talent than they did last year. And look, it's a different league than the AAC. Don't get me wrong. But what SMU did to Oklahoma, what they did at times against TCU, and even Boston College to an extent until that fourth quarter, they played well pretty much start to finish all season. When we talked about this defense not playing well, it would be a drive in the third quarter that would go for 9 minutes and the other team would score a touchdown, and that would be the worst of it. They would hold them to, in the teens and things like that. And they have a lot of veterans coming back, and I think that can't be undersold that a lot of those veterans were even first-year players last year in this defense. So if they get the type of production that they expect out of this defensive line, particularly if Elijah Roberts can come in or back into the ACC and be an all-ACC selection, then you're looking at a defense that can really carry this group, but mainly they can land really in the top 15 of total defense nationally if they play their cards right.
I certainly would prefer, Florida State to win the ACC this year, but it would be kind of cool if a lot of those Miami players who transferred to SMU could win the ACC for the first time.
The salt would be so good.
Yeah. So again, I'm not going to openly root for Florida State to not win it, but I certainly think most of the country outside of South Florida would enjoy that. So, hey, I appreciate you joining me. I chatted with Billy about conference realignment from the SMU perspective. You can check that out if you missed it by clicking the video on the screen now.